Hi, I'm Rebekah Reysen, and welcome to the ChitChat. I'm here with Jeremy Roberts, and we'd love to welcome Dr. Josh Eyler to the show today. Let's tell you a little bit more about Dr. Eyler. Josh Eyler is Director of Faculty Development and Director of the Think Forward Quality Enhancement Plan at the University of Mississippi, where he is also on the faculty in the Department of Writing and Rhetoric. He previously worked on teaching and learning initiatives at Columbus State University, George Mason University, and Rice University. His research interests include the biological basis of learning, evidence-based pedagogy, and disability studies, and he's the author of How Humans Learn: The Science and Stories Behind Effective College Teaching. Welcome to the show, Josh. Good to see you.
Thanks, Rebekah. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for the invitation.
Sure. Well, we're excited to talk to you and definitely appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. So let's just kind of start off with talking about you and your career development. Obviously, you're a very accomplished person. So tell us about your career development. How did you get involved in higher education?
Sure. Well, I'm from a small blue-collar town in Pennsylvania, Hanover, best known for its pretzels and chips that are made there. So we've had the Snyder's of Hanover pretzel. That's from my hometown, and that's really the industry that drives that little town. And education was certainly a big part of growing up, but it wasn't always a given that would be the path for everyone that I went to school with. And so I was a first generation college graduate, and learned a lot from that experience, and had intended actually to be a high school teacher and coach. But about halfway through my college career, I ran across some really great professors who encouraged me to apply for graduate school. And I hadn't really ever considered that before. It wasn't something that I saw much of growing up. I didn't really even know what happened at graduate school, at that time, but really owe a lot to their mentorship and opening my eyes to the possibilities of teaching and doing research at the college level and working with college students. And so that was what opened the door for me. I ended up going to the University of Connecticut for a Ph.D. in medieval literature, and moved from, right after grad school, I went to Columbus State University in Georgia, which is a regional comprehensive mid-sized university right on the Alabama-Georgia border. Has an open access admissions policy for the surrounding counties in both states, and really diverse campus, a wonderful place to begin my career. I still treasure the work I did with those students and with those colleagues there. But it was while I was at Columbus State and seeing the great work in the classroom that really convinced me the role that education can play in helping students to build meaningful lives. And so after I got tenure, I decided that I was going to make a move into the world of teaching and learning centers, which are organizations on campuses that help promote and cultivate effective teaching practices. So I moved from Columbus State to George Mason University in Northern Virginia. I was there for 2 years and was the associate director in their center. It was two of us at a school of about 30,000 students. And so we were busy, and I learned a lot from Kim Eby, who was the director and associate provost there. And then, as I said, about 2 years into that, my time at George Mason, Rice University, I found out, was opening a brand new teaching center. And so I was fortunate enough to get the position of the founding director there, and worked with amazing faculty and staff in my 6 years at Rice to build that center, and really proud of the work we did there. At the end of my time there, I saw an opening here, working not only in the same kind of teaching and learning realm that I had been kind of a part of, but also this great critical thinking initiative with the QEP. And that was an attractive combination for me, because critical thinking is sort of the great unsolved puzzle of higher education teaching and learning. And so I wanted, I was drawn to that challenge, but once I set foot on campus for my interview, it was so clear how open this community was to working with students and to really driving great teaching forward. And so it was the programming that kind of attracted me at first, But once I got here, it was the people and the students that really convinced me that this was a great place to do the work of teaching and learning that I had moved into in the latter part of my career.
So with what you do, you wear a lot of hats here on campus. So you're director of faculty development, director of Think Forward with QEP. You're also a lecturer in writing and rhetoric, but you're also an author. So could you tell us about your role and how those different areas work together and what you do kind of like on a daily basis?
Sure. Well, you know, one of the things I love most about this work is that it's something new every day, as I'm sure that you all can recognize as well. So one day I might be meeting with some faculty about what's happening in their courses. Another day I might be involved in some committee work on the teaching and learning initiative that's happening at the university. Yet another day, I'll be working on QEP related matters, whether that be assessment or the programming or planning for the future. And then the teaching role intersects with all of that and helps to inform the more administrative work that I do and the programmatic kind of project management planning that I work on as well. So it's all of those kind of roles they intersect with one another, and they're all driven by what's the next thing we can do to help really cultivate an environment of effective teaching here on campus.
And in creating that environment right now with what we've got going on for COVID,
right?
What advice do you have for faculty who are teaching students during this time?
Well, you know, I think there are a lot of takeaways from the last 7 months, and it's amazing to think that it's both only been 7 months and that it's been 7 months. Right? It feels both long and short at the same time. But so the major thing that I have experienced is just how hard our faculty have been working to not only adjust to the pandemic overall, but more importantly, and more specifically, I think, to adapt to ways of teaching that were completely new to most faculty. It's certainly true that we've had online courses here for a long time, and that a subset of our faculty were really involved with teaching those courses. But for many of the faculty, this is a whole new way of teaching, and to be not only to have to adapt to that, but to do it at the drop of a dime. It's amazing the work that they did. Reflecting on feedback that we've received both from faculty and students, you know, certainly some things are emerging as areas that to think more about, like how can we create more engaging experiences? How can we create opportunities for interaction regardless of the modality that we're teaching in? All of that is, you know, is really important, and it's an ongoing, you know, evolution really of how to think about the teaching work that we're doing in these different modes. So that's something to think about, and that's you know, the piece of advice that I think we're always sharing is how can you make this process more engaging? How often are you reaching out to students? How can you keep them as involved as possible in the process? Because one of the things we know about from the research on online teaching especially is that social presence, the degree to which students feel as if they are a part of a learning community and are meaningfully invested in that learning community is a predictor of success in those environments. And so really working hard to making sure that students are invested in that way. And of course, it's a two-way street. I mean, students have to put in the effort there as well. But faculty can create the conditions under which it's easier for students to engage, right?
And speaking of student engagement too, which is such an important part of the teaching process, I would imagine. You know, Jeremy and I work a lot of the time with students on academic probation, and they are amazing, amazing people, amazing students. And a lot of the time they have personal stressors that impact academics, but our kind of role is helping them academically to learn skills that can help them with, increasing their GPA. But oftentimes, as you can imagine, study skills are not the most exciting thing to teach. Students, we try to make it as engaging as possible, but what kind of advice do you have, for instructors who are teaching study skills-based classes for probation students?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are two things there. I mean, there's one element of this is the motivation for being in a course like that and for succeeding in a class like that. So there's the motivation part of it. And then I think that there's also the interest part of it as well. So there are lots of, I think, complex threads of motivation for a student who might be in a class like that. Certainly one motivation is, reinvesting him or herself in the work of the university, making a good plan for going forward, needing to learn the skills in order to be successful for the remaining years of their college education. But that kind of extrinsic motivator will only take a person so far, right? It can get them in the seat, but for the actual learning to happen, there needs to be multiple elements of intrinsic motivation as well. So, and that too is a two-way street. There are things that an instructor can do to create an environment where that primes intrinsic motivation, and that can be, everything from how engaging we are with students in the class to, creating assignments that really draw on interests of the students. And I'll come back to that in a second. But a student also has to bring some agency to that process of being intrinsically motivated. That they have to want to be there. They have to understand and value the process in order to see themselves being successful, down the road. That this is one step along the journey of a college career. So that's the motivation part of it, and it's really complex because we're complex. And too often, though, educational systems are thought about primarily in terms of extrinsic motivators. What is the reward? What is the grade that I need? And we don't talk enough necessarily about intrinsic motivation, which would be particularly important for a class like you're talking about on study skills. The other area, though, that I think is really key is interest. And I think that there are ways to develop assignments or activities in a study skills class that would draw on particular interests of the students in the class. So yes, we're going to talk about note-taking today. I'm going to teach you these skills, but you're going to bring in a text that is really important to you, or you're going to go out and find some sort of news bit that is something that you're really interested in, and you're going to take notes on that. Similarly, if we're thinking about how to study for a test, you can make that a game, right? There's a way to create an activity. Jeopardy is the one that always comes to mind, but there are lots of different ways to gamify the process of studying for a test. Not that the student would necessarily have to do that, him or herself, when studying, but that the process of playing the game could help to interest them in the material that they're learning. So that overlaps with motivation, but it's its own thing at the same time, because it draws on our own curiosity, our own desire to be there, our own intellectual interests and passions. So those are things that I think that we could, talk about and think about with a study skills course.
Great ideas, absolutely. I think that's so important. Just the process of helping to know students kind of on a level of, not just their name, but kind of what makes them tick and what they're interested in. And that's great advice, getting them engaged in the class. And, in terms of your experiences in higher education, what kind of advice do you have for those who are wanting to pursue a career in higher education as a faculty member? Because I know with each position in higher education, there are going to be tasks and things to accomplish, but then also, it is a strenuous field. It's trying to balance teaching with research and committee work and all kinds of things. Do you have advice for someone just anyone who may be interested in becoming a faculty member?
Mhm. Yes, definitely. I worked with, in my previous two positions, a major role that I played was working with grad students on prep for the academic job market. And so, a lot of times a lot of the messages that we were sending in preparing for that was to, take a lot of seek out and take as many opportunities as you can while a graduate student that will do the things that will help prepare you to be a successful faculty member. So if there are teaching or TA opportunities in your department, take it to build up, not only to get experience, but to build up your credentials for the eventual job search. If there are opportunities to dive into different research areas than you're accustomed to, really take those to get a sense of the broad landscape of your field. But even beyond these, taking opportunities to do service work, serve on departmental committees, serve on graduate student senate, learn what higher ed is all about through the service component, because the research and the teaching, those are only pieces of the puzzle, and they're big pieces. But in order to really be successful in higher education, you also have to understand how it works. And taking those opportunities, even as a grad student, to serve on committees and to be a part of that side of things as well, I think that is really valuable. I think also really thinking through what you want your career to be. What kind of position do you want to have? Very often, Research One universities that train graduate students to be faculty often train their grad students to want to be faculty at Research One universities, right? That's because that's what the PhD program is. It's really about research, publications, setting a research program that you'll carry forward from graduate school into being a faculty member. But I think one of the key pieces of advice for graduate students today is that there are many, many, many different types of institutions in American higher education today. Of about roughly 4,500 different institutions, only 6 to 8%, depending on how you count them, would be the highest tier research universities. And there's so many liberal arts colleges and regional comprehensives and a huge percentage of community colleges and everything in between, where you can build a very, very fulfilling, meaningful career that would look slightly different from what they would pursue at a research university. So I encourage them to really think about what they want and what they value. And if as a grad student, they figure out, I'd love to teach, and I want to teach college students primarily as a part of my position, then that's really useful for them and for their advisors to know, because then you can say, okay, well, here are the types of schools, then the institutions that you want to be looking at, the liberal arts colleges and the regional universities, where teaching is a significant part of how you're evaluated every year. So those are the kinds of things I would encourage them to think about.
And one thing that we've also hinted about is you being an author. So what we would like to know is, how did you get started in writing and now working in the Department of Writing and Rhetoric as a lecturer yourself? And what are some current projects that you're working on?
Right. Yeah, thank you for that. Well, writing, has certainly always been a part of my career, but I've recently, and this has been a process actually, transitioned from purely academic writing to less formal writing, more general audience kinds of nonfiction writing. And so when I began my career, it was really, hyper-focused, and nothing wrong with that, but hyper-focused interpretations of pieces of medieval literature for publication in peer-reviewed journals. And now I've moved to education writing
Mhm.
more broadly, and that change has kind of mirrored the change in my career and the change in my interests with higher ed, and that was a slower process because it meant breaking a lot of the training that I had and
Mhm.
doing a lot of blogging and a lot of work on social media to develop a more conversational voice, a less formal style of writing, still heavily researched, but where the research hangs out in the background. It's not in the front kind of
Mhm.
driving the narrative. It's in the back informing the reader for the breadcrumbs to follow if they're interested in it. So 2 years ago, I published a book called How Humans Learn about teaching and learning, but primarily what is it about the way people learn, and how can we use that information from the sciences to really inform our understanding of what it means to be an effective teacher. And have really enjoyed that process. It took 5 years to write that book. I've enjoyed the conversations with faculty here and elsewhere that have resulted from that book. Now I'm working, I have a book under contract on grades,
Mhm.
and the problem of grades in many ways for setting up obstacles to learning and to emotional well-being. You know, there are lots of, well, you two know better than anyone, but there are lots of new studies out there showing really disturbing data about the rise in, or about the increasing mental health crisis among
Mhm.
teenagers and young adults. And one of the interesting pieces of that data, once you drill down into it, is the role that academic stress from grades plays in that. And so that's a part of the project, but it's also the first time that I'm not solely writing about higher education. This is kind of a bird's eye view of education writ large, from kindergarten up through grad school, and
Mhm.
just really taking a look at what grades have done and continue to do, and how we could do that better.
Okay.
Well, we appreciate all that, and we're excited also to ask you kind of about your freshman year in our lightning round of questions we like to
Oh,
ask.
sure.
Yeah. So yeah, get ready. We're asking you some questions about yourself and your freshman year. So tell us about your freshman year. What was that like? Paint us a picture of what Dr. Eiler's life was like his freshman year.
Oh my. I was at Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania, not too far from home actually, but I lived on campus. And I was totally lost. Like I said, I was a first generation college graduate. My
Mhm.
parents had had a little bit of college coursework, but I really had no context for what you were supposed to do. I was just basically winging it.
Mhm.
As many first generation students I think are, trying to learn the hidden curriculum. What do office hours mean? Do people actually want me to attend those, or and how do I approach faculty to ask questions? I mean, the whole gamut of issues
Mhm.
that I think are pretty typically seen. I was encountering, and really just trying to navigate, what major I was going to select, and all the common questions. And then trying to navigate all the personal and emotional development that happens during that first year of college as well. I was on the wrestling team at Gettysburg, and so I felt like that part of it was a little bit easier because there was just a naturally formed community of an
Mhm.
athletic team to be a part of, that made that transition just a little bit easier. But yeah, I think in many ways it's a typical freshman year story. And in other ways, it was a story of just trying to figure things out, and figure out the what I saw as a pretty wide gulf between being a high school student and being a college student, and trying to
Mhm.
figure out what that meant for me.
Okay. So, who was someone who has helped guide you or inspired you during your career path?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have so many, you know, faculty who I worked with as a student, and so many peers. I think peers don't get talked about often enough as mentors, but certainly I have many many friends who began as mentors and are still mentors in many ways to me. But the one person who stands out above all others is someone I talk about in that book, How Humans Learn. His name is Chris Fee. He's at Gettysburg. He's in the English department. He's a medievalist, so you're starting to see a pattern emerge. He was very influential on me, and I took many of his classes. He was just an amazing teacher. And the story that I tell a couple of stories, but one of them that I tell about him in the book is that I was a sophomore, and I was sitting, I think it was the fall of my sophomore year, sitting in history of the English language class, which had a reputation of being the worst class in the major, just deadly boring. But we had heard that there was a brand new faculty member who was coming to teach it. And at the, I think it was an 8 a.m. class, which is its own kind of challenge, but the stroke of 8, the door just slammed open, and this, 6'4" giant of a man jumped through the door and shouted, "Whacked," which is an Old English word that means "listen up, I've got a story to tell you." But that's what he did. I mean, that caught our attention. And from there, I was just hooked. It was a style of teaching I'd never seen before. He was super engaging. The assignments that he gave were really meaningful and touched on the bridge between the medieval and the modern. But equally importantly, he was just so kind and so generous with his time. I mean, he took me under his wing. He would let me use his family's house to study for exams if things got too hectic on campus. And he really walked me through the application process to graduate school. So I followed in his footsteps for a lot of that journey, and we still talk a lot today. And I'm really grateful to have crossed his path.
Yeah.
Well, and you are also using that information to help many people on campus and beyond. So we appreciate all the work that you're doing. Do you have any final advice or things that you'd kind of recommend people think about in the pandemic or just in general?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I think that we're getting to a point in the pandemic now where it's really easy to, well, maybe not easy, maybe that's the wrong word, but it's getting a lot harder, both for faculty, for students, for staff. I mean, we've been in this now for 7 going on 8 months, and continuing to have the level of empathy and generosity that we had in the beginning can be a lot harder. It can be more of a challenge now. But I would say it's even more important than it was. The more or the longer we are in this, the more important it is to try and retain that sense of empathy. And I think for that to be true, we have to take care of ourselves as much as we're taking care of other people. And so finding time to unwind, finding time to step away from the work, finding time to engage with your family and friends, I think that is what I'm seeing as emerging as probably the most important priority to keep us all in a place where we can continue just moving forward together.
Definitely great advice. Well, we sure do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks to you both. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, great. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm Rebekah Reysen with Jeremy Roberts, and thanks again to Dr. Eiler for joining us, and we will see you soon. Don't forget to check us out on all of our social media platforms and also via podcast and YouTube. So we'll see you later. Thanks. Bye.